On this episode of Lapeef, Let's Talk.
I think the Cynthia G's are the majority of Black women? Absolutely not. Do I think that the MGTOW is majority of Black men or just men in general? Absolutely not. It's just this space that we're in is a small sector of people that are hurt on both men and women's side. And again, it's not that we don't want each other. We just don't know how to connect with each other anymore. So it's a frustration. It's a gender frustration, but it's not a war. And at the end of the day, women and men, from Mars and from Venus, we've always had this, but we've not always had YouTube, and we've not always had spaces where men can vent. Women, we've vented a lot, but now our venting has gone up to the umpteenth degree with, some of the rhetoric that I hear. So is the war over? I think it's gender frustration that we're having. And I think we're frustrated because we don't know how to get what we want. And that's,
to be quite honest, before getting into like the Clubhouse YouTube spaces, I was totally unaware that there was a war or that this was even a thing, to be quite honest. Now that I'm in it though, and I've been on Clubhouse a year and YouTube since, last year. I think that what the war was about was mainly like ideology. I don't think that women hate men or men hate women. Men love them some women, and women love men. I think it was just the ideology about how we should go about doing things is what the real like conversations came up. And like you said, I honestly think it was COVID. People was in the house and they didn't have nothing to do. They had nobody to talk to.
you can't say that word.
Watch that C word.
Oh, okay. I'll say 2020.
Pandemic.
Right? During 2020, I just think that people were in the house, they couldn't go out. When I worked in the restaurant business, people would come in the restaurant and just tell, a lot of the stuff I hear in the spaces is what I would hear people telling bartenders and, things like that. I don't know. People's lack of interaction, I think, made the online rhetoric and like talking points and people all talking. I think that contributed to it a lot versus when people were honestly outside living life, they were having conversations with people they were outside with versus like there's a influx of people interacting now more on the internet and staying home. Right. So I don't really think it's a real thing. I had no understanding or even identification with it prior to being in the space. So that's just kind of where I'm at with it.
Got you. Chicago Real, is the gender war over, my brother? What's your opinions?
No. Especially as I understand it, how Kevin Samuels talks about it. This is one of the points that he makes that I depart from. But I understand how he says it, because he says the war is over, men won, and women have to come to the table and negotiate. I mean, I hear what everybody is saying. Prior to coming to the YouTube space, similar to Kayla, similar to most people, Q, K, most people, I didn't realize it was this intense. And in real life, I don't think it's this intense. I think it's exaggerated more on YouTube, but I think it exists in real life. And if, we want proof, it's something that I always go back to in terms of if you go into a barbershop, men do not spend an inordinate amount of time talking about, the issues that they have with women, but they do talk about it. If you go to a nail salon, if you go to a beauty salon, on a Saturday or a Sunday, women spend time talking about the issues that they have with men. Right. And so the reason why I don't think it's over is because, number one, men don't act as if the war is won and if it's over. And women haven't conceded that, that they lost. And what I mean by that is if you go to, if you look at history at any point in time, and you look at, when countries went to war, when nobody's sitting up there begging, the winners of the war, when they declared the war was over, it was over. Like, ain't nobody begging for you to acknowledge that the war is over. The war is over. I think the other part of your question is, JR, you asked how we got here. I think the way that we got here, men have ceded power. Men have ceded power and women have been in power for quite some time, and they're not giving it back, and they're definitely not going to give it back without a fight. So I think at this point, we have to figure a way where we come to the table and we negotiate and we compromise, give, you take, and so on and so forth. So because I think one of the things I heard that I don't think anybody got an answer to was around the question of if Black women are saying, well, men need to lead, then as a Black woman, the question becomes, well, who are you following? What Black man are you following? And I can't remember if there was an answer to that question, but I thought that was a poignant question. And then Black men have to continue to develop and invest in themselves to be the leaders that we need to be, to redeem our communities. But no, I don't think the gender war is over, man. I don't think it's over.
All right. Miss Courtney Michelle, what are your thoughts about this? Is the gender war over?
To be honest, I don't think that there's a thing called gender war. I don't think it exists. I think it's a gender frustration. I do not think that men and women are at war with each other, because that means if you're at war, it's violent. A war is I'm willing to do anything to make sure that I win. And then at the end, what does winning look like? Does winning look like if this is a war that women is just going to be Dolly Doxal? If women win, does it mean we're going to have an influx of Michael B. Jordans? So I don't think it's a war. It's a gender frustration. And we've gotten on YouTube because it's turned into our virtual hair salon. It's turned into our virtual barbershop, where these talks of frustrations, it was amongst each other. But now that we've learned that this is a global thing, and I can talk to someone in California and I'm in Alabama, and we still have the same frustration. And it feels good to be able to vent to someone so you don't feel alone. It feels good to know that you're not the only one feeling this way. A lot of times this YouTube space is therapeutic for a lot of men and for a lot of women. But do I think the Cynthia G's are the majority of Black women? Absolutely not. Do I think that the MGTOW is majority of Black men or just men in general? Absolutely not. It's just this space that we're in is a small sector of people that are hurt on both men and women's side. And again, it's not that we don't want each other. We just don't know how to connect with each other anymore. So it's a frustration. It's a gender frustration, but it's not a war. And at the end of the day, women and men, from Mars and from Venus, we've always had this, but we've not always had YouTube, and we've not always had spaces where men can vent. Women, we've vented a lot, but now our venting has gone up to the umpteenth degree with, some of the rhetoric that I hear. So is the war over? I think it's gender frustration that we're having. And I think we're frustrated because we don't know how to get what we want. And